Made dozens of calls, still got nothing. Have you ever spent hours consulting, followed up for a whole week, only to be met with silence? It's not because you're bad at your job, but because your sales approach is no longer effective. Today's buyers aren't easily persuaded by enthusiasm or pretty words. They need empathy, guidance, and a conversation that makes them feel like the decision maker, not someone being sold to. The sad truth is, most salespeople don't even realize they're making mistakes until too many opportunities have slipped away. If you want to break free from the cycle of failure, it's time to rearm yourself before stepping into the battlefield. What makes customers nod even before you finish your pitch? The answer lies here. Technique 1. Peer-to-peer mindset. Many sellers approach a conversation with a bowed head. They view customers as special individuals and treat them as if speaking to royalty. This may seem respectful, but it disrupts the balance of communication. When one side is placed on a pedestal, the other is automatically lowered. As a result, the seller loses all influence during the interaction. They are undervalued, listened to with skepticism, and not regarded as a credible source. This is a fundamental reason why valuable insights get ignored and proposals are easily rejected. To shift that balance, the initial setup must be adjusted. Every conversation should be seen as a discussion between two experts, not between a seller and a buyer. In any meeting, default to seeing the other person as just a regular human being, even if they're a CEO or senior executive. Avoid flattery, eliminate submissive behavior, maintain steady communication, and show confident positioning. Before every call, remind yourself, this is a dialogue, not a plea. How you perceive the other person will determine how they listen to you. But even when positioned correctly, poor delivery can still break the connection if a critical element is missing tone. Technique 2. Tone and rhythm. Using the right words in the wrong tone is a dangerous mistake many sellers make. They memorize scripts and questions, but their delivery is flat and lifeless. No emphasis, no rhythm, no emotion. This makes their speech cold, insincere, and worse, seemingly evasive. In sales, tone isn't just how something is said, it's the second message that accompanies the words. If content and delivery aren't aligned, the message breaks before it reaches the listener. A great seller can use the exact same script, but provoke a completely different response through tone and rhythm. Saying, "That's a great question, you must have a reason for asking it," in a monotone makes it sound robotic. But when said with dynamic tone, timely pauses, and vocal variation, it becomes warm, genuine, and engaging. The difference lies in how the seller controls each breath and pause, turning the conversation into a real emotional experience, not just a sales trick. To master tone, start by recording yourself in real sales situations. Listen back and evaluate where the rhythm breaks and which lines sound flat. Adjust slowly. Practice speaking as if you're telling a story to a smart friend, not performing. Slow down during important points. Shift pitch on highlights, and pause where attention is needed. Let your voice carry real emotion. That's what makes people not just listen, but trust. Once tone captures attention, the next step is to maintain control through skillful handling of ambiguous moments. Technique 3. Soften, then clarify. When customers ask odd, tough, or off-track questions, most sellers instinctively respond quickly. They either counter-argue or rush to block that train of thought. But every hasty reaction sends a signal you're not really listening. Customers feel dismissed or worse, confronted. This is a dangerous turning point in any conversation. If mishandled, you miss the chance to build deep trust right within the dialogue. Soften and clarify is the pinnacle of communication. When a customer says something unclear, don't jump in with a reply. Pause and offer a positive acknowledgement. "That's a great question," or "That's a really good point." This makes them feel respected and more open. Then gently steer the conversation with a simple question like, "What led you to ask that specifically?" This isn't deflection, it's pacing to retain control of the exchange. To train this technique, start by memorizing 3-5 softening phrases that suit your style. Then practice follow-up questions with a gentle but firm tone, not forced, not evasive. When surprised by a customer's question, instead of replying immediately, pause for half a second, smile, and offer a sincere compliment. Then guide them with a question that deepens thought. This strategy not only keeps you in control but also earns natural buy-in. Still, all this steering becomes futile if you cling to outdated presentation habits from the start. Technique 4. Skip the intro. Opening with an elaborate self-introduction is the fastest way to lose connection. In an era of brevity and speed, lengthy personal pitches only reveal one thing: you prioritize yourself over relevance. When you talk too much about you, they stop thinking about themselves. What needs to change is the order of priorities. Talk less about credentials. Focus more on identifying the problem. Before saying what you do, make clear why your presence deserves attention. Brevity, timing, and focus are what truly make an impression. To keep the conversation natural and deep, you must also remove another mistaken sales belief: fake enthusiasm. Technique 5. Maintain a calm tempo. Most sellers have been taught that enthusiasm drives excitement and customer interest. They speak louder, faster, and more eagerly, unwittingly creating an over-the-top version of themselves. Ironically, in today's world, dramatic sales voices no longer build trust. On the contrary, they raise red flags. The audience feels like they're watching a performance, not having a real conversation. When you speed up and overdo it, you lose steadiness, and lack of steadiness always equals lack of trust. What's essential is not climax, but consistency. A confident seller doesn't need to shout to be heard. They slow down, keep a steady, firm tone, and focus on the depth of their words. Stability shows you know what you're doing and you don't need to prove it. Before each call, take a deep breath, reset your pace, and control your tempo. Ditch the performance voice and speak like a real person who genuinely cares. When you stop trying to impress, that's when you begin to influence. Calmness builds trust, but it's not enough if precious time is wasted on unnecessary openings. Technique 6. Trim the small talk. Chit-chat was once seen as the glue for connection, but in modern sales, it's the first thing that breaks momentum. When interactions take place over screens or phones, every second carries more weight. Opening with weather talk, sports, or personal life not only wastes time, but dilutes the objective. Customers aren't looking for social common ground, they want someone who can move them closer to results. Excessive small talk doesn't create intimacy. It weakens your professional value right from the start. Instead of trying to create friendly rapport, focus on showing clarity and intent. A valuable conversation must be led by focus, not friendliness. Strong sellers are those who can strip away the unnecessary to highlight the essential. How you begin a conversation reveals whether you're serving a larger purpose or just filling space. Adjust your entire opening to position yourself as a strategic partner. When customers sense this initiative, they lower their guard and open up to deeper content. And to lead with focus from the very first second, you need a sharp opening that sets the tone. Technique 7. Strategic opening. The opening is not a soft warm-up. It's the pivotal moment that sets the rhythm. It's when you establish your position, seize attention, and prove that your presence has a clear reason. Many sellers underestimate this moment, entering calls tentatively, causing their message to slip away before the listener even tunes in. In an increasingly crowded market, no one can afford to waste the first few seconds. If you don't take control right away, the customer will and not in your favor. When your opening is long-winded, lacks core focus, or doesn't clearly define your role, customers will mentally file you under just another pitch. That's a clear sign you've lost ground from the start. Rambling isn't a sign of expertise. It signals poor preparation and unclear thinking. Sellers who can't nail their core message within the first 25 seconds always end up being led. They lose control and shift into reactive mode, constantly responding to the other person's interruptions. The most effective opening is a concise, well-paced sketch. Sum up your expertise in one sentence. Immediately segue into a context the customer knows, no explanations, no lists. The first sentence must have impact, but not be flashy. Practice clarity, brevity, decisiveness, and proper pacing. The goal isn't instant persuasion, it's to open the conversational space. When you speak as someone who understands the market, you'll be heard as someone who deserves a seat at the table. But even when the start is right, maintaining performance depends on a crucial principle, knowing who to continue with and who to let go. Technique 8. Disqualify. Don't convince. The prevailing sales mindset is to persuade at all costs. The more listeners, the more leads, the more chances. Right? But in reality, the opposite is true. Most people you approach will never become customers. Not because you're not skilled enough, but because they're not the right fit. When you force someone into the process who has no need or can't qualify, you're sacrificing time, energy, and positioning. Chasing volume is the fastest way to burnout and poor performance. Spending too much time on the wrong people makes you miss the ones who actually need help. You keep chasing, texting, sending documents, setting more calls, only to receive silence or polite rejections. Energy drains in endless loops. More critically, you lose control of the process. When someone who has no clear reason to buy remains in your pipeline, you can't tell who's a real prospect and who's a mirage. Sales becomes less of a system and more of a blind pursuit. The right strategy isn't convincing everyone, it's quickly disqualifying those who don't meet the criteria. The faster you identify misfits, the more time you have for the right ones. The priority is to build a clear filtering system: industry, timing, urgency, and willingness to invest. When meeting a new prospect, apply that filter within the first few minutes. If they pass, continue. If not, respectfully end the call early. Better to walk away from someone who isn't ready than to hold on to someone who will never buy. Once you've filtered the right people, it's time to tell a story worth listening to, one that is both real and relevant. Technique 9. The power of story. When sellers explain through theory, they turn themselves into textbooks. Even if the content is correct, well-structured, and complete, customers still feel overwhelmed and disconnected. They don't remember it. They don't feel it. Worse, they don't see themselves in it. Abstract descriptions lack roots without real experience. The listener's mind doesn't connect to accuracy, it connects to experience. When you explain, you're asking for trust. When you tell what really happened, you build trust step by step. Instead of describing, recreate. Choose a situation you've handled, brief but deep. Start with the problem the customer faced, then how you approached it, and finally the real outcome. A specific story carries more power than a list of achievements. Don't say, "We increased revenue by 30%. Tell what you did, in what context, and how that led to results. Truth with context connects faster than numbers. When you tell a story well, the customer doesn't need to imagine, they see themselves in your picture. But even a great story cannot replace alignment, something only possible if you know how to measure ongoing feedback. Technique 10. Continuously check for feedback. One of the most common sales mistakes is turning a presentation into a monologue. Sellers talk non-stop, presenting benefits, features, and processes without pausing to check if the listener is actually following. In their mind, explaining thoroughly equals persuasive. But in reality, listeners drift off midstream and begin losing focus. Without feedback signals, you can't tell if they're keeping up, if they understand correctly, or most importantly, if they're actually interested or just politely waiting for you to finish. To maintain continuous connection, you need to check signals in short intervals. Don't wait until the end to ask. Any questions instead? Observe, probe, and invite interaction frequently. This helps you adjust in time, emphasize what matters, skip what doesn't. Short segments ending with open prompts are opportunities for the customer to nod or respond. With consistent feedback, the presentation stops being a lecture, it becomes a co-created process. That's true effective communication. And after every short segment, you must hand over the stage by inviting the customer to ask what they truly want to know. Technique 11. Invite questions. Most of the value in a conversation comes not from your presentation, but from the customer's questions. That's where they reveal what they really care about, what makes them listen and consider. But if you talk too long, run over time, or don't leave space, they won't get the chance or feel encouraged to speak up. Proactively inviting questions not only shows respect for their involvement, but also opens the door to their hidden concerns. Where there are questions, there is buying motivation. You just need to know how to unlock it. Once the exchange is open, the conversation must not end vaguely. There has to be a clear next step. Technique 12. Obsession with the next step. A conversation that ends without a clear next step is one that begins the path to being forgotten. Many sellers feel temporary satisfaction after finishing a pitch. They assume, if the customer finds it suitable, they'll reach out. But in reality, it never works that way. Without a clear anchor for the next step, you lose control. Everything becomes uncertain, and that turns you from coordinator to chaser. In a world of proactive players, being passive is not a winning option. Failing to define the next step at the peak moment leads to a string of follow-up emails, check-in texts, and just touching base calls. These reactions erode your positioning and make you seem insecure in the buyer's eyes. They don't need to avoid you, they just stop replying. Everything enters a holding pattern. When you start chasing someone else's schedule, your process falls out of sync. It not only hurts your close rate, but also disrupts your pipeline draining time from truly mature opportunities. To maintain flow, build a habit of locking in a clear, solid endpoint right on the spot. Every exchange must end with a specific appointment with time and purpose. No need to wait for an email reply. No need to ask, "When are you free?" I'll follow up instead. Offer a reasonable schedule, confirm alignment, and lock it in using a calendar tool. Every next step confirmed in the moment is a thread that keeps your sales cycle flowing. Skilled sellers don't let time slip, they frame it with commitments. But even with everything on track, one final challenge remains: handling resistance. Technique 13. Slow down on objections. Objections are where sellers most easily lose control. When customers say, "That's too expensive," or "I'm not sure it fits," most sellers instinctively speed up, immediately arguing, adding reasons, offering discounts, or pushing to save the deal. Speed increases with anxiety. But here's the paradox: the faster you go, the less trust you build. When you rush, the customer senses you're defensive. When you're defensive, they assume you're hiding something. And once they doubt you, everything you say loses weight. Speeding up during objections doesn't help you control the situation. It only helps the customer conclude faster that this person is trying too hard to sell. A confident seller does the opposite. They breathe, keep a steady voice, and respond with a pause. That pause is what gives space for the buyer to think and for real concerns to surface. Most objections are just the surface beneath them. Lie unresolved questions or unclear doubts. If you interrupt with reasons, you'll never hear the more important things being hidden. The key to mastering objections is not instant replies, but guiding the other person deeper into their own reasoning. When someone says, "I think it's expensive," instead of arguing, slow the pace and revisit intent. "I understand. What makes you feel that way?" Your tone should be soft, but not weak. Lead with curiosity and confidence, not pressure and fear. When you control the pace during tension, you send a signal. You don't sell with urgency, you sell with understanding. That's when objections stop being barriers and become paths to decisions. It's time to make a clear choice. Continue repeating the familiar, or break the mold to master the sales process with precision and full control. How many real opportunities were lost? Not because the product wasn't good enough, but because the approach lacked strength. Each technique here is not for reference. They're built to be applied. Those who dare bring them into the next conversation will see results multiply. Stop memorizing. Start applying. Stop waiting for the right time. Create it yourself. The market doesn't favor the hesitant, it makes room for those who act first. What will you apply in your next call? What will you leave behind for good starting today? The decision is in your hands, but only action creates change. Thank you for watching the whole video. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.